All right. So I think we can get started actually.
Yeah, let's get started, Bernard.
All right, everybody, welcome today to our healthcare webinar. This is the first webinar we're hosting on a specific industry, and we're excited to have some of our most active users here joining us, but also some new faces who will get an idea of how Stack AI can expand across many healthcare operations and back office workflows. So I'm very happy to have you all here. I'm gonna pass it to Pablo to host everything. In the meantime, we have our Q&A chat open in the bottom. We're gonna be monitoring the Q&A, and if you have any questions, feel free to drop them there, and we will try to answer live. If not, at the end of the meeting, we'll allocate 15 minutes of time where we can have the chance to do a small Q&A session, a small panel to answer any pressing doubts. So with further ado, I pass it to Pablo to get started.
Perfect. Thank you, Bernardo. And welcome, everyone. This is the agenda for today. Okay, let me go through it very quick. So first, we're going to share some insights and some learnings that we've seen in healthcare. Okay, how companies are deploying AI in operations. So that's going to take 10 minutes. Okay, roughly 10 minutes. But then the main part of this webinar is really to showcase some specific AI solutions. Okay, here you can see listed 3. It's going to take us roughly 30 minutes. And we're going to show you how to build those solutions using Stack AI. And then at the end, we're going to leave 10 minutes really to have a Q&A. So feel free to ask anything throughout the call and also at the end. Okay, so let's jump into it. So AI in healthcare. Here you can see some of the use cases we've seen. Okay, so companies are really trying to improve their operations. And now with this new technology, so with GenAI, really there's plenty of specific processes that can be enhanced. Okay, so this is just a snapshot of some of the use cases that we've helped our clients to build. Okay, so you can see anything related with search, okay, information search. So it can be patient clinical, okay, information. It can be as well internal policies that sometimes, it's very time consuming to go through those policies and get the right insights. Okay, also related to clinical reporting, anything that has to do also with like back office processes such as, booking patient appointments. And also there's a big component on education and onboarding of new employees of healthcare institutions and companies. And then, well, the list goes on and on. Really any type of, business process that has to do with paperwork, with text, and even with audio. Okay, we're gonna see a very cool use case with some phone calls and see how we can work with that with LLMs. But really, there's plenty of possibilities in healthcare, and this is why we're excited about this specific industry as well. If you think about use cases, you can break them down into 2 large categories. Okay, the first one is the knowledge management. Okay, so how you can handle and manage your internal knowledge of your company. Okay, this is going to be more on the conversational side of things. Okay, so it's going to be someone at your company talking with a large language model and getting some insights about the documents that you have. Okay, and then we have the back office automation. Okay, that this is more related to automating full processes. Okay, this can be seen in terms of like multiple inputs that you send to a large language model, and then you have this large language model working on its own and sending you the result. Okay, this automation can also happen in the background. Okay, it can be a large language model receiving emails and also generating drafts. Okay, and the good thing about automation is that it can be done at scale. Okay, so you can really automate very long processes or processes that take a lot of time from your employees, and you can fully automate that. Our recommendation really is to start with the one on the left. Okay, the knowledge management is the first use case that is really intuitive, and it's what people are doing right now with ChatGPT. You talk with a large language model, you send you send it some documents and you ask for specific insights. Okay, so you are having a conversation, and it's easier to really adopt Gen AI at your company and get people, trying out those systems. You can see some examples on the slide. So a copilot for physicians, for example. Okay, you can have as well an assistant to help with medical research. Okay, since it's very document intensive. And then you can have also an assistant helping you with insurance policies and premiums and benefits. Okay, so there's a lot of potential there. This is, I would say, like the first step if you want to adopt Gen AI in your company. But then we see a lot of value on the back office automation. No, this is for us like the next level of Gen AI adoption, and this is something that we see companies right now focusing. Once they've deployed a knowledge base, a copilot, now they want to really fully automate a business process. And we listed in this slide a couple of three solutions that we see that are very common. Okay, so we have, for example, the care support representative that has to generate emails when a patient or a client asks something. Okay, so in this case, you can have a large language model drafting an email for this, care support representative to really take a look at the draft and then just send it. Okay, you can also have compliance verification. Okay, you can verify communications from your your employees to the patients, and you can have this like feedback loop on a scale manner and very automated. And you can of course have as well like review of insurance claim in an automated way. Okay, so it's important to have this in mind. There's like two big buckets of solutions. The first one is really more on getting information on a conversational way with your knowledge base. And then the second one is really having a large language model running some processes it can be in the background, or it can be someone giving some inputs to this large language model, and then it's going to generate a report, it's going to generate an email, it's going to generate specific things. Okay, so with that in mind, let's take a view of how we see a clear use case in the knowledge management type of use case. Okay, in this case is the physician copilot. You can see really that it's like a custom ChatGPT where you can have conversations. Okay, you can have as well citations. Okay, this is something that we enable in Stack AI, and you can get track of what information the large language model is pulling in order to answer your specific questions. You can have as well follow-up conversations, and you can have a source preview. So you can click on the specific citation and you will see where the information was taken from. As well, this is an example of a back office automation use case. Okay, this is what I was mentioning before, the care support representative email generator. This is kind of like the design or the AI solution that is living in the background. Okay, so you would have an email that is received from a patient. Okay, you see here the block that you are using in Stack AI. Later we're gonna show you how you build this very fast. But you would have a node which is gonna receive emails, okay, from patients. Then you have a knowledge base, which is this block at the bottom that is called Documents plus Search. Here you will build your internal knowledge base with best practices on how to draft those emails, what are the information that can be used to answer your patients. Okay, in the center you're gonna have the large language model. In this case we're using an Anthropic model. Okay, so another insight here is you have to be careful on selecting the right large language models for your use cases in healthcare. Specifically, Anthropic is HIPAA compliant, so this is why we're using it, and it's available in Stack AI. And finally, of course, for this large language model, you will need to give some instructions on how it has to generate that emails and any specific detail that needs to be taken into account in order to draft the perfect email to answer the patient. Finally, you see on the right hand side an email generation, or an email that is going to send. So this node is going to send an email, but as a draft, okay, for the care support representative really to take a look and maybe make some final editing, and then sending it to the patient. Okay, so you can fully automate the process without generating the draft, but of course you might want to create drafts specifically at the beginning while you are testing the system. Okay, so those are kind of two of different use cases. One of each one of the big buckets that we explained before, and now I'm gonna talk a little bit about the challenges that we saw, working with healthcare companies. You can see here listed 4 different challenges. The first one really is the expertise on AI, machine learning, and even also on software development. Okay, so building those AI applications is very time consuming, but you also need this expertise internally. So it's not easy to build those AI pipelines. Okay, so this information that is flowing, that is being retrieved and then sent to the large language model, and then an output is generated. So you need this type of expertise in-house. Privacy. Okay, so we see that this is something that is very particular to the healthcare industry. So you really don't want information from your patient being sent to OpenAI or Anthropic or those large language model providers for fine tuning. Okay, so this is something that is very important for the healthcare industry. Next is data governance. Okay, so who internally in your company is going to have access to the knowledge base or to the clinical history of a specific patient. Okay, so you have to manage as well, the roles of people using your AI applications. And finally is the use of AI. So you can use AI really to generate very different outputs. Okay, not only related to healthcare. Okay, so you could be using a large language model to ask about things that are out of scope, okay, of your company. So you want as well to be able to restrict the usage of AI of the people that are going to be using it internally at your company. Okay, so here we are listing some of the important things that you should take a look at when you think about AI in your industry. Okay, so for how to mitigate this challenge or how to face this challenge of the expertise, well, there's AI builders out there such as Stack AI that help you build those AI solutions very, very fast and without having to really code and also to really know the specific of an AI system. Okay, so this is like a very efficient and very, very good way to get started and really build as many use cases as you can think of. And of course you also have the option of doing in-house development, so hiring a full team of AI experts and software developers. But of course this is more expensive, and it's going to take more time to get the solutions in production. Okay, for privacy, the things that you have to look for are, well, SOC 2 compliant, GDPR, and also HIPAA compliant, as we were mentioning before, and also for specific models that are HIPAA compliant. Okay, so in that sense, you can look for Anthropic models, and you can look if you want OpenAI. There's an option with Azure, with Microsoft Azure, that they are hosting their own OpenAI models, and you can use their tenants really to use a HIPAA compliant OpenAI model. Okay, so this is something that you want to look for as well. And then AWS is hosting Anthropic. Okay, so as I was mentioning, Anthropic is HIPAA compliant, and if you want to do it in a more secure way, you can use AWS tenants. Okay, and privacy is not only about what we show there. You can also have different options of on-premise deployment. Okay, so you can have deployments in VPCs, so virtual private clouds, or in your own servers. So here we see companies looking for options on how to deploy this on-premise. Data governance, well, here was what I was mentioning before. So you should look for access control options and features in the platforms that they are using, groups control as well, and single sign-on whenever is possible. And finally, for the use of AI, well, there's plenty of features in that sense that are being developed right now in the different platforms. So ourselves, we have guardrails that are helping those AI systems really to restrict the usage of AI and make your users, ask the appropriate, questions, and then, filter a little bit what's going to be the output from those systems. Okay, so those are the challenges that we see, that healthcare, companies are facing, and some of the elements that are helping, those companies face those challenges. Okay, now without further ado, let's go to the demo, and I'm gonna do a brief description of what we're gonna see now. Okay, so we picked 3 use cases. The first one is the physician copilot. Okay, this one falls in the category of knowledge management. Okay, it's gonna be more on, having a conversation with a large language model and receiving information and insights. Then we're gonna have the hospital, care support representative, that it's gonna be more on a automation way. Okay, it's we're gonna use a specific user interface that we have in Stack AI that is called a form. Okay, and that we see a lot of potential for that specific UI. And we're gonna see, how to generate emails based on the results from the form. And finally, the third use case is gonna be a SOAP report generator. Okay, so we're gonna take a recording from a call or a visit from a patient, and we're gonna automate, take the transcript and then generate this SOAP report. Okay, so now that we've seen the insights from the AI in healthcare, and also you now know what use cases we're gonna show up. I'm gonna leave the floor for Bernard, that is gonna build those use cases in Stack AI in few minutes. So you're gonna see that you can build the custom Gen AI solutions very fast with Stack AI.
All right. So yeah, Paulo, if you allow me to share my screen a moment, get started. So thank you, Paulo, for the comprehensive overview of the platform. As Paulo was mentioning, the key component here is to understand how these 2 use cases these kind of 2 paradigms of AI can be implemented in a single fashion. As Paulo started, we're gonna start by implementing a simple use case, which is gonna be a knowledge management use case for healthcare assistants. Our first component will be a healthcare copilot. What this will look like is gonna be an AI assistant that, given a patient history and a collection of knowledge about how to run and assist in patient meetings, will support a physician on running a conversation with a patient. For instance, if I got a patient history for someone, I may ask it questions like, what would be 3 good questions to ask the patient in this meeting? And given the patient history in a document from either a report or imported from our previous system, from our previous system, it can infer what would be the appropriate way to run this conversation. We can also ask it to write an outline for the meeting, in which case it will look at the different resources it has on what are the best practices for clinical supervision, or the best practices for training from training modules, and outline what will be the important things to go over it: introduction, review, how well will be the standards to manage, and give you citations on each of these components, such that you can go to the underlying document from which you got this resource and cross-check any reference it gives you. This is a classic use case of knowledge management, combining both internal knowledge from an organization, either coming from the internet or coming from a workflow, into this assistant, and where you can easily preview the source of all this knowledge within an internal knowledge base as the assistant is working. To give you a quick demo of how this will work, if I start a conversation, I can attach a patient history in PDF, and I can, from that attachment, start asking questions such as, how do you operate, how do you run, and give you that information. This doesn't have to be just a copilot. This can also be exported as a form, in a way in which the AI assistant is given the patient history in PDF, and in that form, you submit a question and it will respond. What would be the appropriate next steps for this patient? And through this form, which you can easily share, protect, and handle with governance, interact with this data. Where an AI assistant will look at the document, it will look at the knowledge base, and through it together, synthesize a response, as it's doing here in this suggestion. And you can see here, it suggests next steps based on the references it gave you on medication, admitting the patient to the telemetry floor, all these steps. And perhaps I want to mention that this can be customized to the specific knowledge of both how the institution functions, but also on how it might be regulated internally for all these physicians. So with further ado, I'm gonna show you briefly how we would build this workflow and give you the room with some specific insights on how you would customize it to further work to your application. And as we notice in many of your cases, I enabling you to add creativity as part of this process. So here in Seeking, in fact, how this operates together. If we were to build this use case, we're gonna start from scratch in Stack AI. To think about this use case, I'm going to the Stack AI builder. The first component is understanding what are the inputs and outputs of this assistant. As we can see on our Copilot, we have two inputs. We have a question from the physician, which basically it's the request it has, and the patient history in a document. So we will need to have resources and inputs to process that. If we go back to the builder, the first input we have will be a text input that very much represents the question of the user. Now, how can we input a document to this workflow? If we go to our sidebar and we go to the data loader section, we have the option to upload a document as a data loader. This gives you the option to put a document as a parameter, not just in the builder, but also expose it to the user in the interface by enabling this button. We're going to have it as an option here. Then, given these two pieces of information, we want to get a suggestion grounded on ground truth logic. We already have one output to this workflow, which is exactly what we need for this specific application. Now, how can we aggregate this data together? The key component will be to use a language model. And a language model that can take a look at both these sources, but also a knowledge base in order to answer questions. Since we're going to be handling patient data, it's going to be important that this system is HIPAA compliant and does not have data retention. For that purpose, we can use Azure language models, AWS Bedrock language models, or Anthropic language models, which are all HIPAA compliant with a business association agreement signed with Stack AI. If we start by adding an Azure node, we'll be able to add this language model in the middle. And the workflow will be such that the language model output will be the response we'll see in our form. Now, there is a missing step. We have the input, we have our inputs, we have our language model. Now, we need to give this language model some context on how our system would work and how to respond to requests. And for that, we will add a knowledge base with documentation on how to support patients. Documentation that can come from internal procedure manuals from the hospital or any other sources. For instance, it can be from internal policies or for how to manage insurance queries, for instance. This knowledge base operates in a simple way. You upload documents, and each time you upload a document, this will get chunked, will get parsed, and will be uploaded to a small search engine. In this case, you can see an example of how I upload a CSV. It will be indexed into this small search engine. And the way it will work is that based on what the patient is requesting, it will query the knowledge base, which will find the relevant information to support the patient request, and then provide it as context to a language model. And then we can start combining things together. We can connect, we can send to the language model the user request, the document from the patient history, and organizing it in a stage in which you have knowledge, documents, inputs, and a language model to aggregate and synthesize. You can customize how these documents are being parsed and previewed when you go to the settings. You can customize which algorithms you want to preview it, what methods you want to use to search. We won't touch that because the default parameters we have are enough for this functionality. But it gives you the option to understand how is the language model actually previewing this document. In this case, you can see, in fact, how it actually was managed for mechanical supervision, how it actually was parsed. And for our final use case, we may add more documents, but it gives you all the functionality. Now, with all this knowledge together, we need to ask the language model to aggregate it to answer a question. And now we enter into the next step, which is prompting this system. For this purpose, because we're analyzing documents, we're going to need a language model that has a large context window. That is, a language model that supports larger amounts of text. The best model for this application is GPT-4 Turbo, which supports 128,000 tokens, which is about 70 pages of text. This means it's more than enough to support the knowledge from this document, which will be a patient history, and the document plus search. It's also the most accurate model in the market, being the highest ranked today, and functions well for these chat applications. The way that we configure our prompt in Stack AI is twofold. There's going to be two key components. First, we need to configure the instructions of the language model, basically telling it what is its role, what does it need to do. In our case, we'll tell it it is a healthcare assistant for physicians. Yes. And we need to give some instructions how to reply. Be polite, be helpful, make sure to only give factual information. And you can add more details on how to respond in this section. This doesn't have to stop in a few sentences. It's a good starting point, but after that, you can then add more custom rules, specific ways in which you should interpret the data, and then with that, aggregate it for a response. Now, we are giving it all this information, document, a user request, and a knowledge base. How we should use and aggregate all this together. Inside of our next second section, we have a prompt, which is basically a template for how every message to a language model will process the data coming to it. The default template is just telling it the user message comes from this variable input 0, which indeed is the variable, the user message, but we want to have more. So we can actually specify it and set it up such that it will process each component individually and know what everything means. A quick tip is that if you look at our examples of a good prompt, you'll see how we recommend dividing everything for documentation, how to specify what is what in this section. But one thing that we have noticed significantly improves the result is to enclose each source in an XML tag. So you're gonna see in a moment what that means. So if I tell it, the following is the patient history, which we know comes from this document, doc0, we can get high accuracy by enclosing in HTML tags what would be the variable we care about. And we can put in here the source, document 0, of course, in curly braces. You will notice it will work as soon as it highlights in green. And above, we could tell it the following are best practices to support patients. Or more than best practices, these are best practices and guidelines. And the way this will work is that we will be adding these two sections. Notice how I enclose everything in these XML tags in here, but it is actually documented as something that significantly improves performance and make things more clear for the language model. So with that, we actually have completed implementation of this pipeline. If we want to use it in a chat fashion, we will have to set up a memory. In this case, you will see we recommend using a sliding window input, which will remember each message of the user. We need to tell it what is the message of the user, in this case, in 0, and tell it how many messages we want to remember. In this case, the past 10 messages. We can enable it, since we want to know exactly where it got each source from the documentation, we can ask the language model, please give me citations. We have to enable that option here. And that will already by itself give a request. If we don't want to even send any personal identifiable data to the system, we can enable PII compliance and tell it to either give us a warning when it notices any PII or encrypt it such that it will not be sent to a language model. In the case that a phone number, an email, a social security number, or a credit card is sent, it can automatically encrypt it or warn that this data was available. With that set up, we can turn these options, we can keep them off, but we will see how this system now can operate. We're gonna have three components: a component with inputs, basically telling us what is the information from the user, the request from the doctor, and the patient history, a knowledge base with best practices and guidelines, and a language model that will put everything together to generate a response. And that will be our pipeline for a physician assistant, which, as we see here, can effectively look at this document and this request in order to generate a response. Once we finish building this pipeline, we can save it, we can publish it, and once published, we can go to the export section and pick which interface we want, either a form interface or a chat interface. We can customize the name, we can customize the styling. In this case, I can tell you this is my physician assistant. I can secure it with a password to make sure that only authorized people can access it, or with SSO. I can give a name to these inputs for reference, request, patient history, and to the response I want, suggestion. I can save all these changes, and now I have an interface to interact with the system. I can also customize it with my own logo, my own branding, suggested messages, and open it from there. And I'll have my own interface to interact with my physician assistant, implemented in a few minutes, and secured internally with our platform, for our platform. And we'll see it's all there. So With that, we have our physician assistant fully implemented and ready to go, as we showed before. And you can extend it very easily with more options, more steps in the future, and all set up. That's going to be our first use case. And it's an example of what knowledge management can bring to the table. Now, what happens if we want to move beyond knowledge management and we want to move to a use case that represents more of a back office process? In this case, a very common application of note-taking, a process where we need to draft a report based on a meeting or based on a recording. A common example where this will happen will be an example of a meeting recordings. As many of you may know, a common standard for reporting is SOAP reports, which are a standard format on how to manage patient meetings and report note-taking on it. Normally, this can be very tedious and will require going through a large amount of audio and meetings. But with AI, we can actually automate this process to a high level of efficiency. In this example here, I create a system where I can record a conversation between a patient and a doctor, explaining how they operate, explaining the status of the patient, explaining the status of the doctor, recommendations, next steps, actions, in this case, a recording. And I can upload a patient history of reference. And from there, have us submit this system so that it would take the patient recording, take the patient history, and draft an SOAP report on the conversation between the doctor and the patient, automating what normally would be a process that could take hours of work, or time at a time. And you can see it can be formatted with the desired system it wants. In this case, I uploaded a previous recording we had and uploaded this patient history. What you can see here, kind of like how is it taking, combining all the information together towards that report, which then can be reviewed, can be input in another system, and can be managed by the doctor to assist that. And this is an example of where a back office workflow can be easily augmented with a language model by combining two tools that powerfully connect and put everything together and generate a plan directly from the meeting we had. Now the question is, how do we set up such a workflow in Stack AI? Because it clearly probably has many components. The surprising thing is that it's actually surprisingly, it's a very small workflow. If we begin a new project again, we can start from an empty project and we will ask again, what are the inputs to my system here? The first input we had, of course, it's going to be a recording. That means that we won't start our workflow with a text input. In fact, there's no text involved here. It will be, however, a multimodal setting, in which case we want to receive audio and transcribe it into text. In this case, we can add an audio to text model, and we can pick the provider from the model we want. We can use OpenAI Whisper, which will be HIPAA compliant, or deep grammar models, which can also be HIPAA compliant setup. Specifically, for instance, Nova 2, their most performing, fastest, and highest accuracy model, which operates well in English. They also offer versions of Whisper, which are multilingual and can easily operate across different geographies and run this conversation. We're going to keep Nova 2 right now for convenience. Now, given this system, we will want to generate this SOAP report. We probably will want to also receive another document, another input, which will be the document with the patient history. As in the previous case, we will add a data loader to input a document into the workflow, which will be exposed to the user. And that will give us a reference for how to operate the system. We want to put everything together again with a language model, and we will pick a language model that is optimal for patient document drafting. In this case, we will actually be using a model hosted in AWS Bedrock instead of OpenAI, and we'll be using OpenAI Anthropic Cloud 3 Sonnet, which is a state-of-the-art model from Anthropic set up for large document workflows. It supports over 200,000 tokens in its input, meaning that it can support large conversations, it can support entire guides of documents and entire books, much more than GPT-4, and is much more performant in tasks that require long writing, in our experience. They're also fine-tuned to common tasks that require safety and procedure security, so it is very much fit for this kind of application. Again, we will want the output of this language model to be the response of our project. And finally, in the middle, we will add a knowledge base telling us what are the guidelines for upright drafting such report. So for that, we will add a documents knowledge base again, which can be imported from a different source like SharePoint, Google Drive, or so. And in there, upload our guidelines for how to run this SOAP system, this SOAP report. In this case, we can upload these guidance from another document, another theory document we have prepared, and have that be the reference for our system of how to draft such a documentation. And with that set up, and with that knowledge base already fully implemented, we will be then having a system where, given the recording, we will create the knowledge base on like the best practices for setting up this report. We will have a document with the reference for the language model and the patient history, along with the recording. And then we'll connect everything into this language model to put it together. And with that, we have set up an entire workflow. There are three components: the inputs, the knowledge bases, and the output. As you can see how this paradigm of input, knowledge, and language model and output can satisfy many common applications of language models and AI, where you basically power a language model with information for your knowledge. And so we can also add potentially a template for other specific SOAP reporting we will want as part of our knowledge base, or we could add examples on what would be best practices to operate forward here. Now with that set up, let's configure a prompt for this language model so that it can know how to respond. And we can tell it in here that it's not an assistant. We will tell it, you draft SOAP report for give from a transcription of a physician call, of a patient call, patient-physician call, and given some best practices on the operation. The user will provide you with a patient report and the call transcription. So basically, we're giving the instruction to the language model how to operate in this circumstance. And as you can see here, now in the prompt, we need to tell it how to structure everything. Because our inputs are audio, documents, and a knowledge base, we'll have to be very precise on how we want to use each of this. And we will follow the same trick as before of using XML tags to represent each variable. So in this case, we will start by representing the guidelines of how to write this report. Guidelines for drafting an SOAP report. And in here, we will put in the guidelines again in XML tags and put in curly braces in the middle the reference for the source of this, which will be this document plus search with ID docm0. We'll add this in here, and we can put docm0 as a reference. Now below, we'll have to tell it, okay, give me the patient history. The following is the patient history. And we can put in here again between XML tags what we want and a reference for the source, because since it will be uploaded as a document, the source for it is doc0. And finally, we will give the transcription of the call. The following is the transcription of the call coming from our deep neural model. And now we have set up a system in a few minutes that can take a call, take a patient history, take guidance on how to write a report, and generate it to be then exported. Another common suggestion we will make would be to ask it to give you a particular format. Language models are very good at formatting responses if you ask it to do it in the proper way. So we will start by telling it, please format your response in Markdown and add headers and sections. That way we'll know that everything responds to needs to be formatted and will be operated together. If we go to the settings of the language model, because this will not be a conversation, we can ignore the memory and turn it off. We can potentially enable PII compliance to not send any PII over the internet, or to warn if there's any PII on the conversation, or add some guardrails to prevent any kind of hallucination. We can save this workflow, publish it, and then have it ready to be exported. Again, if we go to the export tab, we can choose to export a form. And you can see that within our inputs, we're going to have our audio to text, where we'll say, this is the recording. We'll have our document for the patient history. We'll have our output with the SOAP report, with the SOAP note-taking system. I'll give it a system, like a note-taking. We will give it a name, save these changes, and now have an interface that, again, can be password protected, can be secure with SSO, and access our assistant for note-taking. All within a single interface that can be shared and embedded online. With what we saw, now we will give you all this Markdown formatting that can be nicely shared, copied, exported from here, and have all those notes for based on the patient history and the conversations that we have said. And with that, we have leveraged the power of multimodal AI to build a simple internal tool in 10 minutes, basically, that can transform hours of work for a healthcare organization per year very quickly. Now, with the next few minutes we have, we're going to briefly glance over our last use case, which will also be an interaction between workflow automation and a simple and a knowledge management system to run a customer support system or a patient support system for IT and operation internally. To that end, we're going to create a new project in Stack AI again, and from this empty project, get started to interact with data. Now, with ideal system, we want one in which every time a support text receives information from a patient, it can look at the entire knowledge base and policies from how the hospital or clinic responds, and based on that, come with a suggestion for a support desk representative or for the physician or the team in place to know how to respond to it, either via email or via suggestion. As Pablo showed, we can even automate this such that you can get an email draft every time that a new request comes through and a new ticket arrives. An example will be a patient in which we will ask, where should I go if I need to renew my policy? And a ticket like this, we could execute it and get our suggestion from a language model how to operate it, and a draft responding to the patient and what will be an email responding to the patient for this query. In a fashion in which you are automating or augmenting a heavy request where you have to spend hours looking through resources from insurance policies, from internal management policies, from internal operating procedures, and aggregate everything together to easily respond to common requests. Of course, guardrails so that it can be grounded by information from the hospital. In this case, for instance, it will give a specific information about the insurance of the patient from United Health One, which is the one supported by this specific Massachusetts hospital. And from there, from that given response, also give references for where it will be the right place to connect, and draft an email with the information for how to respond to this. All right. So what would be the best way to build this? What would be the appropriate way to build the system? In the interest of time, we won't build it from scratch, but we can show you a pre-built infrastructure, a pre-built architecture for such a support system, which will be in fact following the same paradigm we used before. In this case, an architecture for this system will have a few steps. The first step will be an input representing the patient message that we want to respond to. Just that one input. And two outputs. One where we get the suggestion for how to respond to a request, and one where we get the email body. This can be just a text output, or it could be immediately sent automatically to an email. For instance, we could send a Gmail by using our Gmail integration. We will send the completion as the content of the email, create a draft, and specify a specific subject for the email request. We could also have potentially another input for the user email and have that be the reference for how to respond to the patient request, both as subject and email. And then the pipeline will be such that you'll have two language models, one that generates a suggestion on how to respond, and one that drafts an email based on that suggestion. We're going to be using, for this specific suggestion, a language model from OpenAI, GPT-4 Turbo, configured to run the conversation based on the user request and a set of operating procedures for how to operate based on the insurance of the hospital, the administrative guide internally, and some operating procedures from the hospital, aggregated from a series of PDFs, which as well, again, can be imported from different sources such as SharePoint, Google Drive, OneDrive, etc., only in a HIPAA compliant fashion. When we send everything to the language model, in its system prompt, we will tell that it has to support answer questions on knowledge base and respond to the message briefly and politely, and use this context to reply, the context of knowledge base to reply to the user message. Then, once this is complete, we're going to get one output with the suggestion we want, the first output for the system, which is raw text from the language model that can be interpreted by a human. Then, what happens if we want to further format that into an email? To that end, we'll add a last language model here, an Anthropic language model that will have an instruction to draft an email to the patient based on the answer provided by the user. And we're going to tell it where the patient message comes from, being sent here from the input directly, being told what was the response from the language model above, which will be, again, enclosed between XML tags for accuracy, and then given the instruction to respond only with the email body. And with that, we'll have a pipeline that receives a patient request, looks at the knowledge base of the operating procedures of the clinic or hospital or the internal operations of the firm. With that, provide a suggestion and have a follow-up step to automatically draft an email and put it on the and have it ready for the review of the support team, or export it as a form interface that can be used downstream. And with that, again, save our pipeline. With English here, save it, publish it, and have an access to our system to interact with our support system, the pipeline. And of course, you can always customize it to operate in a form. You can tell it what the inputs you want, which outputs do you want. For instance, you can have separate input in here with the patient email to have the specific information we care about, and then the suggestion and the email draft. We could save this, and now we'll have a form interface to easily automate this process. And with that, we have gone through our 3 key use cases for healthcare with AI. Of course, naturally, there's many more you can build, and there's many more applications that can be expanded from here. Of course, in terms of paperwork, automatically reviewing documentation, summarizing documentation, summarizing insurance policies, comparing insurance policies. The list is practically limitless. And if you want to learn more, you're more than invited to book a time with us. Just go to our website and reach out, and we'll be happy to help you architect what will be the optimal way to automate these processes with Stack AI. And with that, we conclude the entire implementation section. We have some time left to answer questions, and I'll leave it to Paolo to run this a small section or bit of the meeting. I appreciate everybody for their patience and for their attention. Pablo, I pass the space to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bernard. So I've been answering questions in the Q&A already, but if you want, we can, well, I don't know if there's new questions, but if not, I propose we go through the main questions that were asked. So we share the knowledge across all the participants. The first questions, well, about the recording. Yes, we're gonna share the recording, okay, via email, and we're gonna post it in YouTube, so you can access it via link. There was a question about how to avoid hallucinations. So this is something that we touched lightly during the demo. So basically, every time you use a RAG, so retrieval augmented generation, so every time you provide context to the knowledge to the large language model, context on your own information, this reduces the hallucination. You can also play around with the temperature of the model. So the temperature is a parameter you can change in order to force the model to be more creative. Okay, so have more hallucinations or less. Okay, so this is something that you can click on the settings on the large language model block, and then set the temperature to 0, for example, which by default is the setting that we enable. And then there's also what Bernard was telling about the guardrails. Okay, so you can as well limit the responses of the large language model. And finally, you can always focus on the prompt of the large language model and specify, if you don't know the answer, do not make up an answer, provide this email so that the patient or the customer can reach out, okay, whenever you don't know the answer. Okay, so you can as well give additional instructions to avoid those hallucinations. Then, is there any possibility to keep track of the prompt history? Yes, in Stack AI you can play around with versions, okay, of while you are building your AI application, and you can go to previous versions and see the prompt that you were using. Okay, so that's one way. The other way, it's you can go to the logs module that we have in Stack AI, and you can take a look of what was the prompt used for each one of the executions that happened for your specific flow in Stack AI. Okay, so those are the 2 ways you can keep track of your prompt, which is very important, as mentioned. Okay. What else? Let me see if there's okay. Is re-ranking possible in Stack AI? Yes. So we have some advanced features in terms of RAG, so retrieval augmented generation. Every time you drag and drop a knowledge base, for example, the one that we were using throughout the demo, the documents plus search, you can click on settings and you will see some advanced, features to improve your RAG system. Okay, so how information is retrieved from your knowledge base. Okay, and there's the option of doing re-ranking. There's the option of doing query transformation as well. Okay, so there's some advanced, features in terms of, RAG and parsing as well. So there's plenty of options that you can configure or set up specifically for your application in the knowledge base. Can you embed the form in another front end? The answer is yes. We provide a code snippet that you can copy paste and put it in your own front end. And the form is going to be embedded in your end product or end UI. Okay, so this is something that a lot of customers are asking us, and this is something it's enabled and you can use it. Okay. Can Stack AI pull from a BigQuery data? Yes, this is something that we enable in Stack AI as well. You can use it as any other, knowledge base. And also we have Snowflake, okay, for people that might be interested in this type of, queries. And I think that's it. That's it. Is okay. I see 3 more questions. Okay, is it possible to get these architecture templates? Yes, so those templates are available in Stack AI. Okay, every time you create a new project, you're gonna see a long list of templates, and the ones we are using or that we demoed today are already there. Okay, and if not, we're gonna add them. Okay, maybe one is not there. We're gonna take a look and of course provide those templates since it's gonna help you out, really getting started very fast. How can I get my bot provide images, okay, from my knowledge base when responding? Okay, so there's 2 ways of doing this. You can give instructions in the prompt to the large language model to generate images, okay, whenever it makes sense, okay, based on the information that is coming from the knowledge base. And then another option is using text to image. Okay, so this is a multimodal model that we provide in order to transform any result from the large language model into an image. Okay, we provide DALI. Okay, so the model from OpenAI, and we're gonna integrate more models very soon. Okay, what are other use cases for back office automation? Well, Bernard mentioned some. I mentioned some as well. So we have plenty that has to do with, for example, like compliance checks of emails and SMS. Okay, so this is something that can run in the background and can run at scale, and it can help you automatically check the compliance of your communications. Okay, there's also things about checking policies or checking insurance benefits as well at scale. And actually something that we didn't mention, you can run something that we call batch processing. Okay, so this is a feature in Stack AI that helps you run as many scenarios or as many inputs as you want, and have the large your use case run those inputs that you send automatically at scale. Okay, so for example, you could copy paste in an Excel file different inputs that can be messages from your sales representative or from your care support representative, and automatically you're gonna process this as a batch. Okay, what else? For Copilot, how do we handle having the LLM select to read information from a specific patient record? Do we have to have a database of all patient records to query? Yeah, so the large language model per se doesn't know anything about your patient, so you have to provide that information. And you can do it via a knowledge base, okay, a knowledge base that has, for example, the clinical history of all your patients. So it's gonna, every time you ask for a specific patient, it's gonna retrieve information from that knowledge base. So that's one option. And then the other option is you can also, let the user of your application upload their clinical history, okay, as Bernardo was showing in the demo. And you can do this for, a specific patient. So maybe the knowledge base is around best practices. And then every time, a physician plays around with your application, she can, upload the specific, clinical history of the patient. What else? Can you share more about Stack AI certified? Okay, how it works, what are the requirements? Well, for this one, we have a Stack AI Academy, so specific, videos and content that, our certified partners need to go through. And I can share more details offline, Vishal. Let's do that. Do you provide these models and token for client demos? Yes, so reach out to us if you need to do demos with clients and we can set this up for you. Okay. If this can be integrated into tools like Ring Central or other, voice IP apps to easily retrieve and process call recordings. Yes, we enable, API calls. So it's just a matter of understanding how to retrieve information from those systems. And this can, be automated very easily in Stack AI. So we enable custom API calls to retrieve that information. And well, Bernard didn't show it, but instead of using our pre-built UIs, you can always use Stack AI as something that is running in the backend, and you can send via code that information. Okay. Okay, and I think that's it. That's it for today.
There's one more question by Cliff asking how I can integrate Stack AI with EMRs, electronic medical records.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, to answer our question briefly, so a common mechanism to achieve that is to both use the Stack AI custom API internally to interact with the API of the EMRs, giving each request, similar to the way in which we interact with our knowledge bases, or to receive EMRs using the Stack AI API directly, meaning that you can build a workflow where one of the inputs of the workflow represents the EMR, and you can connect it with your system such that whenever you receive a new record, you send the EMR through that input. Depending on the paradigm, Cliff, there's many ways to interact with it. Most likely by using a custom API in the middle if you're trying to do some sort of knowledge management, but it can also be sent as an input to the system. Thank you for that question.
Okay, we are at time. So thank you very much for, so many great questions, and see you in next webinars.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thank you everybody for coming. Bye.